Well, good evening, everyone. Really glad that you're here tonight. I'm excited to hear from Stefan Gustavsson, who's with us here from Sweden tonight. Stefan is one of the founding members of the European Leadership Forum. This is a ministry that takes place in Wisla, Poland. We're going to be sending 10 people, myself included, in May to the European Leadership Forum. They're engaging with leaders, pastors, missionaries, and others there across Europe as they come for training. And this is a ministry that LifePoint has been supporting through our missions efforts as well. And so this is something we tried to pull off a few years ago, and a little thing called COVID got in the way of Stefan's travel plans, but we're able to get him here this evening. And Stefan is the lead apologist as well for the European Leadership Forum, has established an apologetics ministry and network in his home country of Sweden as well. And he was up at Zionsville Fellowship on the north side this morning, wonderful church there that's engaged in gospel ministry on the north side, preached there, and made his way back down here, and then I think in a couple days heading to Scottsdale, Arizona, so making his way and some rounds around here in the United States as well. But he's come to share with us tonight. I think we had lunch together, and unless you've changed your plans, Stefan, he's going to do kind of an introductory type of talk, then have an opportunity for some Q&A from that. We'll take a short break, and then we'll come back. He'll give us a little bit longer presentation and opportunity for some Q&A as well at the end of that. If that's changed, he'll let us know that, and we'll do whatever he tells us to do. I told him once he comes up here, he's in charge this evening. So we've got mics there in the center aisles, and you're welcome when the Q&A time comes to go and afford yourself of those and ask whatever questions or concerns that you might have on your mind. So again, thanks for being here. Stefan, thank you, brother, for being here. Come on up, and we'll give you the time now.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me here. Thank you so much for coming out. The evening is much more fun for me because you are here. So it's good to see you all. Thank you for partnering with us at ELF. It means a lot for us and for the gospel work in Europe. So a warm thank you for that. I guess one of the reasons I'm invited here to talk about sex is that I come from Sweden. Sweden, since the 1960s, has become a kind of infamous, world famous for leading the sexual revolution. So if you're living in Sweden, for a long time, you have been forced to struggle with those issues that we're going to struggle with tonight. I think it's really important that we talk a lot about sex, because sex is such an important part of human existence. We are bodily creatures, we are sexual creatures, we are male and female. It's an important part of life. If we are Christians, we believe that the whole idea of a body, of sexuality, of male and female, is actually God's idea. So we shouldn't be ashamed of talking about sex and trying to understand that part, that important dimension of human existence. And I'm looking forward to our time with Q&A, and looking forward to hear your questions. So when I talk here, remember your reflections and your objections or your questions, and download them on your mental hard drive and upload them and at the microphone later. The Christian church is a gospel movement. The heart of the Christian movement is the good news about Jesus Christ. One should notice that the apostles were not around in antiquity around the Mediterranean with a political campaign trying to have a kind of moral reformation of the Roman Empire. That was not what the first Christians did. What they did, were that they were preaching the good news about Jesus Christ, calling people to repent and receive new life, and they were forming churches, Christian communities. So that was the basis. But of course, people who came to faith started to live in a new way. They got a new mindset and a new perspective on life, on money and on authority and on body and on sex and on children, on every aspect of life. And gradually, the Roman Empire, through the proclamation of the gospel and the establishment of Christian churches and disciples who started to live in the light of the gospel, the Roman Empire started to change. Before the gospel preached, in terms of sexuality, it was as chaotic as is the Western world today. You could find any sexual idea and practice in the Roman Empire. But that gradually changed, not through a political campaign or trying to have a moral reformation of the empire, but through the preaching of the gospel. And let me just remind you why we are Christians. I like this quote from the Anglican theologian Richard Sibbes. He lived many centuries ago. He said, "There is more mercy in Christ than sin in us." Let us remember that during the evening when we continue to talk here. There is more mercy in Christ than sin in us. So, we're going to talk about sexuality. And this is a big, big issue. And we can approach it from many different angles. There are many different, really important perspectives. So we can think about the view on sexuality from a historical perspective, and I will say something about that, because the sexual revolution is something with historical roots. We can think about it from a philosophical and ethical perspective. What is a right sexual life? Of course, as Christians, we need to think about the Bible. What does the Bible teach? And how can we form that into a coherent, healthy theology about sexuality and body? And of course, those issues are also deeply personal. It relates to us. And some of those issues are deeply troublesome for ourselves or for someone in our family or for friends we have or people we care. And of course, in one evening I will not be able, or we will not be able to address all those dimensions. But I just want to say it's a complex area of human life, and I'm deeply aware of the personal dimensions of these issues. If we try to look at our own culture, the Western world, so Europe and the US and Australia, the Western world, I would say we as a culture, we are in the midst of a perfect storm culturally. And that's why it's so chaotic at the moment. Our culture have started to say there is no God. It's more obvious in Europe, which has become so secular, but it's coming very fast also in the US. People say, there is no God. There's nothing above us. The only thing that is real is this world. This physical material world, that's it. So we have rejected God, his existence, him as a creator. If there is no God above us, that means we are at the center. No one can be higher than ourselves. We shouldn't bow before anyone. And if you analyze our culture, we are a deeply individualistic culture where self-expression is the most important thing. So we have put the self at the center of the universe, the place that God had in previous time. And the next step, at the center of our self, we have put sexuality. So sexuality has now become such a defining aspect of what it is to be human. And people define their whole existence out from their own sexuality or sexual identity or sexual preferences or understanding of their sexuality. And those three ideas have come together and forms a kind of perfect storm. No God, the self at the center of the universe, sexuality at the center of self. All 3 points is in direct opposition to the Christian faith, who says there is a God, a living God, who has created everything. He's a Lord over everything, and he loves us, and there is intention to human life. So it's not the self at the center, it's God. And we have our important place. So to be an individual, to have a self is important, but it's under God and related to God. And we affirm sexuality as Christians, but sexuality within a context. Where's the roots of this perfect storm? Why has the Western world, traditionally formed by the Christian faith, how have we come to this situation? It goes back to something called the Enlightenment. That is the late 1800s, where the intellectuals in our culture started to say, we cannot believe in God any longer. We cannot believe in Christianity any longer. We cannot believe in the Bible any longer. That was ideas amongst the elite, philosophers, artists, some scientists. The population did not see things like that. So both in Europe and in the US, strong revivals during the 19th century and in the 20th century. But gradually those ideas have now trickled down and takes over large portions of the population. It has taken over in my country. The secular perspective is the dominant perspective. Now, if there is no God, that has a lot of implications for sexuality, how to think about sex. Most of the people at the time of Enlightenment did not draw any consequences from the rejection of God to the area of sexuality. So they say there is no God, but most of them continue to live with a more traditionally ethics. It is like this. It takes a long time for ideas to be fully practiced. But there was one person who fully understood the implications of, if we reject God, what does that mean for sexuality? And his name was Marquis de Sade. He was a French nobleman. Marquis is not a name, it's a title, like a count or a baron or something. So his name was de Sade. And he affirmed the Enlightenment thinking that there is no God. And he drew out the consequences for our view on sexuality. And he's called the founder of eroticism. It is from his name the word sadism is coming. To find enjoyment in inflicting pain on another person. To find pleasure, sexual pleasure, in putting pain upon another person. Because that was he practiced. He lived a horrible life and was imprisoned a number of time because of what he did to other people sexually. What was his philosophy? Here's 3 quotes from him. There is no God. Nature, how do you pronounce that word? Suffices, that's the way. Suffices unto herself. Thank you. There is no God. Nature suffices unto herself. All universal moral principles are idle fantasies. There are no more moral principles, universal. You can formulate any principle you want. And you can never say that they are right or they are wrong. You can say it's wrong to inflict pain on another person. And listen to this. Nature has not got 2 voices, you know, one of them condemning all day, what the other commands. So most people can realize the situation where you have an urge to do one thing, but your conscience is saying no. So two voices. Oh, that would be nice. No, that would be wrong. And he says, no, there's only one voice. Whatever your urge is, whatever your desire is telling you, that is the only voice. It comes from nature and there is no other voice. So he's opening the field for any sexual practice. You can never say that anything is wrong. So his philosophy is often summarized as what is right. Whatever can be done must also be said to be right. This is the philosophical background for the sexual revolution. Now, most people didn't realize that. It took some time before those ideas started to spread in the Western culture. In the 1930s, a German, Wilhelm Reich, he understood and started to promote the ideas of Marquis de Sade. And he is the one who coined the phrase the sexual revolution. He wrote a book with that title. A book that has been described as the Mein Kampf of eroticism. What was his message in this book? Well, his message was this. He said, we need a revolution. And you know, like revolutionaries, they always do this. They identify, this is a horrible situation. Here is oppression. We need to do something. And then they have a program to get rid of that oppression and liberate the workers, for example. Okay, so Wilhelm Reich said, the Christian morality has oppressed people, saying there's right and wrong in the area of sexuality. We need a sexual revolution. And it looked like this, according to him. We need to abolish lifelong monogamous marriage. Of course, you can be married if you want. But you can have sex before marriage, outside marriage. You can be married anytime you want. You cannot have that as an ideal, a lifelong monogamous marriage. That needs to be destroyed. You should encourage infantile and adolescent sexuality. So sex is not only for adults, it's for young people, it's for children. Sex is just a bodily thing. There's nothing more to it than breathing or eating or sleeping. So we should encourage everyone to just live out their sexuality regardless of age. He said, every idea of suppressing a sexual impulse is destructive, and abstinence is pathological. So you have a sexual desire, a sexual impulse, you should live it out. You say yes, you should say yes to it. You should not hold it back, because that will only hurt you. It will be destructive for you. So just let it out. And therefore, the category of sexual perversion should be eliminated. Perversion means when something is beside how it should be, the perverse, it's outside. But there is no way it should be. And therefore you cannot say of any sexual act that that is a perversion. So that whole concept, we need to get rid of it. That is it is sexual program. And from the 1960s, starting in Sweden and Denmark, this program has started to be practiced in our culture. You have to give Reich that his revolution has been fairly successful. At least if I think of European culture. It's only on one point where culture disagree with him these days, and that is, we do not want to connect sexuality and children. Pedophilia is still generally strongly condemned. But I would say that is the only point where he has failed. In all the other points, our culture has moved in that direction. Not that everyone is thinking like this or applying this in their daily life, But the culture generally is moving in that direction. It has gone not equally far in all countries. I come from a country where his revolution has gone quite far in the general culture. So what does it mean, the sexual revolution? You can describe it like this. It is that you separate sex from the context it previously was related to. So you make sex something within itself, not related to marriage. Of course you can have sex if you're married, but you can also have sex, of course, outside marriage. So you separate it from marriage. You separate it from love. Of course you can have sex with someone you love, but you can also have sex with someone you are not emotionally connected to. You can see sex like a tennis partner. The whole point of having a really good tennis partner is that you are equally good on the same level, so it's really fun to play. And so you can have a sexual partner just for fun, without having any commitment or love. So you can separate sex from permanence, from this long-term commitment. We separate sex from procreation. Of course, nearly everyone knows, okay, new life is coming through through sexuality and through intercourse, but in practice we divorce it. Think of all the unwanted pregnancies. People are just surprised. Whoa! I didn't count on that. There was a new life. Suddenly a woman is pregnant, and both the man and the woman are kind of, oh, what's this? So mentally, we have divorced it. And that's why we have those tragic high figures of abortion. And now lately, we divorce sex from the body and its natural function. So the sexual revolution is this separation of sex from the context it traditionally and biblically belonged to. Now we could have gone through what this has made with our society, and it's easy to show that this has been a very destructive development for our culture. Just on a pragmatic level, it's been a destructive move for our culture. And we could go through area of area. Family stability, sexually transmitted disease, abortion, pornography, divorces, sexual violence, area after area. It's not a beautiful picture. And more people who are not Christians are seeing this at least in specific areas. Let me quote here Fukuyama, who is a world-known historian and sociologist. In his book, The Great Disruption, he's describing the last 50 years of Western culture, the last 50 years of Western culture. And he says this, and he's just looking at what is the consequences for society. One of the greatest frauds perpetrated during the Great Disruption, the last 50 years, was the notion that the sexual revolution was gender neutral, benefiting women and men equally, and that it somehow had a kinship with the feminist revolution. In fact, the sexual revolution served the interest of men, and in the end put sharp limits on the gains that women might otherwise have expected from their liberation from traditional roles. It's been negative for half of humanity. It was a revolution on male terms, male selfishness. This was obviously seen in the Me Too movement. I guess you are familiar with that. So many women who came forward saying that they have been used sexually. Sweden is the country in the world where the sexual revolution has progressed the furthest. Can you guess which country had the biggest Me Too movement in the world? That's a rhetorical question. It was Sweden. Here is obviously a connection. And actually a number of young non-Christians are starting to see this. If you want to read a very interesting critique of the sexual revolution from a young non-Christian woman, you should read Louise Perry, Rejecting the Sexual Revolution. Very interesting. She's just analyzing what's going on in her generation in terms of sexuality. And from the beginning, she's just affirming it, naturally, because it's part of culture, so she's supposed to affirm it. And then gradually she sees through it and sees how devastating it is, especially for women. And she then wrote this book, The Case Against the Sexual Revolution. Now, we are going to go into what is this evening's specific topic, the LGBT plus agenda. But I want to stop here first. I wanted to give this background because the LGBTQ agenda is the latest consequence of the sexual revolution. So I wanted to give that background. And I want us to take a few moments here to see, are there questions, objection, comments about this? Let's do it like this. Try to find a nice person close to you. Hope you manage. And react to what you have heard so far. Just formulate what you're thinking about what you have heard so far. And we take 2 minutes for that. Come on. Okay. Thank you. We will continue now with our main message, and then we will have a much longer Q&A, so you will have a lot of possibilities to ask questions. And if you want to ask questions on this first part, please do at the next Q&A. Okay, the LGBTQ agenda, the latest outworking of the sexual revolution. So we are all on the same page. LGBTQ+, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, queer, plus stands for there is a number of letters too, of like asexual or pansexual, and the whole alphabet can be put in there. It's important to see that what's happening now is not that people change their view on a specific sexual practice like same-sex sexual relationships. It's a broader issue. So what we have seen now being introduced is a new sexual ethic, so a new way of thinking about, for example, same-sex sexual relationships. But it is also a new definition of marriage and family. So that's a broader issue. And it is a new anthropology. And anthropology means view of the human being. So the trans ideology are introducing a new way of thinking about what it is to be human. So it's really a broad issue. There are a number of questions, issues involved. The LGBTQ agenda have a huge impact on the young generation. I saw recent statistics for the US that now nearly 1 in 4 teenagers now identify as non-heterosexual. It used to be between 2 and 4%. Now it's 25%. Huge numbers of them in the survey is in the B category, bisexual. So they say I relate both to male and females. But it's an enormous increase in how people identify themselves and think about themselves. How has this come about? Let's do some thinking here. Let's begin to think about culture, and I will give you my analysis of Sweden. but I hope it will be helpful. In my view, I'm not that old. I guess some of you will disagree, but I don't think I'm that old. I can follow Swedish culture from the late 60s. I was born 1960, if you wonder. In the 60s, in Sweden, the majority culture, and let me say, I will start with the two first letters. I should have said that, lesbian and gay. So talking of homosexuality now. The majority in Sweden in the 1960s would still see homosexuality as a disorder. So there was a general, a negative stance, saying, okay, we realize that it's a fact, that people are sexually attracted to the same sex, but it should not be lived out. It is a disorder, so a negative view. That was quite quickly replaced by a view of saying, no, that's too harsh. You cannot say that. It's still not an ideal situation, but it's kind of an emergency solution for some. So if you are same-sex attracted, okay, it's okay to express that and live it out. But still there was a kind of evaluation. It would be better if. That quite quickly was changed into the majority started to think, no, this is an equal variation. You can be use your right hand or your left hand. You can have different colors of your hair or your eyes, and you can be sexually attracted to a male or a female. And you cannot make a value judgment. It's an equal variation. And that in some circles went on, and people say, well, gays have more fun. It's actually a superior lifestyle. The gay community is much more creative, much more open, much more authentic. So it's actually a superior lifestyle. That is not the majority, but you can hear those kinds of voices. The majority position is it's an equivalent variation. So you cannot make any value judgment on it. There is no way it should be. This is an enormous change in culture during a short time, one person's lifetime. Generally, cultural changes take longer time. So this is a quick, drastic change on these issues. How was it changed? What kind of arguments made this change possible? Well, in my view, and here I will be a little bit harsh in terms of the arguments, it was a number of cliches used by the media and very cleverly used by the gay movement. Cliches that sounded very convincing and that changed the mind of so many people. So here's a number of these cliches. So people say, well, this is a question of human dignity and human rights. You cannot deny the dignity of someone, and therefore same-sex sexual relationships should be affirmed. Now, I wholeheartedly affirm everyone's human dignity, and I affirm human rights, but here is a logical mistake. You cannot go from everyone has an equal value to therefore every action is equally right. Now we as humans with dignity and with equal value and rights as everyone else can act sexually in a wrong way. So the anthropological question of are you a valuable human being, do you have rights, is not the same as the ethical issue, how should I express my sexuality? That's two separate issues, and they conflated them. Secondly, they say, well, this is genetically caused, there is a gay gene, and it's unchangeable, and therefore you cannot say anything about it. The problem here is that this is scientifically false. There is no gay gene, and it's been convincingly shown through studies with identical twins that our sexuality, or what we are sexually attracted to, is not genetically caused. You can, if you Google the scientific magazine Science, you can see articles on this. And secondly, the logic here again is totally false. Genetics do not decide our ethics. Even if it were genetically caused, it does not solve the ethical question, what is right to do? What if aggression is genetically called? Can I justify my aggression in every case because I say, oh, it's just my genes doing it? No, I need to have an ethical discussion. So you cannot mix genetics and ethics in that way. Others said, well, this is found in nature. A number of years ago, there was a big exhibition in Stockholm showing what they called homosexual behavior amongst animals. And therefore people say, well, it's natural. Now the problem here is, should we really make animals our ethical role models? If you start to study nature, animals can do anything towards each other. They eat each other. You know, you cannot look at animals for guidance of our sexuality. We are human beings. We can make choices. That cannot animals do. So it's just a false argument. Love can never be wrong. Now, finally, something I can agree with. Love is always right, absolutely. Absolutely. So to care for someone, to have compassion, to do good towards another being is always right. But the problem here is that you cannot equate love and sex. I'm called to love my parents, but I should not have sex with them. Love my kids, not have my children, not have sex with them. Love my friends, not have sex with them. So I really need to think carefully in what loving relationship should that love be expressed sexually. So that's again a separate issue. Finally, but this is about compassion. The traditional sexual ethics of either a male-female marriage or celibacy, that is a too hard teaching. We need to be compassionate towards each other. Yeah, that's true. We need to be compassionate. And we need to have a church family which is compassionate. But compassion is not enough to guide our sexual ethics. And everyone, regardless if you are same-sex attracted or attracted to the opposite sex, of course have to realize the situation that I cannot demand a life with a sexual relationship. So compassion is really important, but it's not enough to solve our ethical dilemmas. When I listen to the gay movement, I find a very incoherent argumentation today. From the lesbian and the gays, they often say that, well, homosexuality is a fixed identity rooted in the body, and they go back to this argument about the genes. It's a fixed identity rooted in the body. The bisexuals are saying, no, it's not fixed at all. It's very flexible. It can move between the two poles of male and female. It's not fixed. It's flexible. The trans are saying it is a fixed identity of the inner person in contrast to the body. So just opposite to what the lesbian and gays are saying. So it's a fixed identity of the inner body that is independent of and in conflict with the body. And queer, they say, it's no fixed identity at all. Everything is constructed and can be deconstructed. There's no authenticity or intrinsic identity to be true to. You can recreate yourself in 100 different versions. So nothing is fixed. Now this seems to be problematic in my view. We need to have a coherent view of the human being and on sexuality. Because the media has been so friendly to the LGBTQ movement, they never analyze this. They never ask hard questions about what is actually your view on body and sexuality in your movement. So they have come away for decades with contradictory statements about how to think. Let's move in to the area of ethics then. How should we live sexually? Every responsible human being have to think about that. How should I live a responsible life sexually? The suggested criteria in our culture now is that few people would follow Marquis de Sade really to the end. So most people realize, okay, there must be some limits. So people say, you should follow your heart. Very good. I think there's some truth to that. We should listen to our heart. But our heart is a complicated thing, so we cannot only listen to our heart. So then most people realize this, listen to your heart, but do not hurt anybody. I agree with that. Should not hurt anybody. And then most people realize this, okay, can listen to my heart, should not hurt anybody, but I need to have one rule more. It needs to be between consenting adults. And I would say a majority of people in Sweden today say these 3 rules are enough. This is how I try to navigate in the area of sexuality. But they seldom think through what's the consequences if you just have those 3 criteria. What do you do with polygamy? People follow their hearts. They do not hurt anyone. It's consenting adults. Why shouldn't we accept that and change our marriage law and just affirm polygamy? Seems like, if you start to think about it, maybe those 3 guiding principles are not enough. Or what about this strange? This is not a big phenomenon, but if you study sexuology, you would learn that there's something called dendrophilia. Some people say, I'm sexually attracted to trees. And I recently read, no, not recently, it's a number of years ago now, an interview with a Swedish girl who said, I am a dendrophile. And she went out in the forest and related herself sexually to a tree. Now, she follows her heart. She didn't hurt anyone. She was a consenting adult. The tree was not, but she was. Now, the problem here is that it seems like we need more to think about sexuality. And this is what philosophers call natural law. To think more about, are there indications for what we are designed for as human beings? What is the kind of goal of who we are? Like an acorn, it is designed to become a full-grown oak. There is something within the acorn itself that points in that direction. And then things can come in the way, so it does not fulfill its identity, but there is something here. In terms of sexuality, take polygamy. What is the problem with polygamy? There is many problems. One of them is that it seems to go against the nature of romantic love. If you're into romantic pop songs or romantic poetry, you will never in world history find serious love poetry singing songs to Anna and Caroline and Mary and Martha, and it's always directed to one person. There's something in romantic love with this uniqueness, the two of us. And a third party is a real threat to real love. There's something in romantic love that points in the direction of the monogamous. And poets all through history, in all cultures, have sensed that and formulated it. Or think of dendrophilia, the young woman. A relationship to a tree cannot fulfill the fullness of what sexuality is, which is to relate yourself to another person, not a thing. And her whole body is there with the possibility of bearing new human life through sexual encounter. The tree cannot fulfill the true meaning of her sexuality and her body. And you can understand that without reading the Bible. Kind of reality itself points in that direction. If you start to think about it here, there are indications in our own existence pointing towards the heterosexual relationship between a male and a female. Physically, it is a man's and a woman's body that fits together sexually. Two women cannot be bodily united. Two men cannot, in a way that is natural for the body, be bodily united. So physically, there's something, a male and a female body, that is what fits together. Biologically, if you can go by Charles Darwin, he would say, well, reproduction is the main reason behind our sexuality. Biologically, we have our sexuality for procreation. Now, it's only in the male and female relationship procreation can take place. And psychologically, there is a fascinating complementarity between male and female, which is not there if you have only males or only females. We recognize that all over the board. We think of, we can think of boards. We say, oh, it's more creative if there is both males and females. There's something happening when we come together. I think this points in a certain direction. If we go to the Bible, and we do not have time to go through the biblical material, I will just point to you that the Bible have this perspective. God has created us as male and female, and God's meaning with sex is that we should be united, one man and one woman, for life, and we have a calling to procreate. And then you have several passages in the New Testament that says no to same-sex relationships, especially Romans 1, and then there are two places in what's called the sin catalogs that says no to a number of different, both sexually and other sins, including same-sex sexual relationships. And then you have texts in the Mosaic Covenant. I think they are in a different category because we don't apply just directly everything that is in the Mosaic Covenant. So we need to read them carefully. And we have some stories in the Old Testament. It is the creation story and the New Testament's text that I think are the most important here in guiding the Christians' way of thinking. That is what Jesus is referring to when he is asked about marriage and divorce and remarriage. He says, he does not answer those questions immediately. Instead, he brings his listeners back to the beginning, saying, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning, and then he quotes Genesis 1, made them male and female. And he said, therefore, because you are male and female, therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So Jesus is taking his perspective from the creation stories, Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, and affirming male, female in a lifelong covenant. Now, I fully understand how controversial this is in our culture. I do quite a lot of student missions. And so if you were a student audience at a university somewhere in Sweden, and I have given a presentation on whatever subject, science and faith, or reliability of the Gospels, or resurrection of Jesus, or what about Jesus and all world religions, or whatever theme, you can be quite sure that someone raises their hand and says, okay, what's your view on homosexuality? Which of course is frustrating. Well, I've just given you a lecture, 30 minutes on science and faith. Let's keep it to that. But of course, there's many situations where the audience will not let me off the hook. So what would you say if you were a non-Christian audience? How would I answer this question? I would answer like this. I cannot give you a yes or no answer. If you really want to know, you need to be prepared to follow me through a few minutes of explanation of my thinking. If you're not willing to do that, I'm not willing to answer your question. Okay, so then they agree. They are willing to not have a yes or no answer, but to actually follow along. And then in my mind, I imagine that the person and the audience, they are holding in their hands a number of helium balloons. And each balloon above their head is a prejudice they have against what they think are my view on homosexuality. And before I can say anything about that, I need to pick a hole in each of those balloons to let the emotional energy out so we can actually have a conversation about it. So I would say like this. You know that I am a Christian, and therefore I affirm the dignity and worth of every individual. Everyone is created in the image of God and is loved by God. Christianity is the most inclusive of all philosophies and religions. Everyone has a dignity. If you think human rights and human dignity is important, that is grounded in the Christian faith. We have those concepts because of Genesis 1. Secondly, as a Christian, I believe all of us are broken and fallen. The technical term in the Bible is sin. We have missed the goal of our lives. We have a broken relationship with God. And again, here, Christianity is the most inclusive of all religions and philosophies because it places everyone in the same boat. Everyone has sinned and lost the glory of God. And I just quoted Paul for you now. So the Bible puts me at the bottom, which means that I cannot look down on anyone. If you're sitting at the bottom, there's no one beneath you. If you have met Christians who are looking down on you because of your sexuality, they are not expressing a Christian faith. And I'm really sorry if you have met Christians with that attitude. Thirdly, I'm a strong proponent of a free society. So you are free to live your life, and I'm free to live my life. You are free to have your thinking, I'm free to have your thinking. Of course, we need to have some rules in terms of sexuality. You are not allowed to hurt anyone. I'm quite sure we can agree on some really basic rules. But inside those rules, you are totally free to live your life. And then I hope we can have a good discussion about what you're thinking about sex, and I can explain my thinking of sex. But I'm not here to try to rule your sexual life. You see what I'm doing so far? I've not said anything about my view on homosexuality. I've tried to pick a hole in a number of balloons. Fourthly, as a Christian, my question is not what do I want, but what is the will of God? Now, if there is no God, I fully understand that your ultimate question is, what do I want? That follows logically. And for me, it's also important, what do I want? But since I believe in God, I have a question that is above what do I want, and that is, what do God want? I think God has designed us, and it's important to follow His will. So that is my ultimate question. What is God's will for me and for my sexuality? Now, historically, Christians have all agreed on your question on homosexuality. Today, as you know, Christians are divided. You can find churches that affirm same-sex sexual relationships, and you will find churches who says, no, that's not in accordance with God's will. Why do Christians not agree any longer? There are two reasons for that. We think differently in terms of how we prioritize the signals of the bodies, and I think we can agree that the body is giving heterosexual signals, that it's a male and female body that can fit together sexually, that can procreate, which is the ultimate biological reason for our sexuality. And then our inner being, where we can have a sexual desire towards the same sex. Traditionally, Christians have said you should go with the signals from the body. Today, some churches say, no, you should follow your inner being. And the other reason is we have different views of the interpretation of the Bible. There are a number of texts in the Bible that says no to same-sex relationships. The traditional view is that is as a principle. The new interpretation is that no, that is related to some specific cases when children are involved or if it's an oppressive relationship and so on. Now you can Google my name and you will see that I have the traditional understanding of sexuality, that it is not in accordance with God's will to live in same-sex sexual relationships. I realize this is a hard answer for you to understand, and you cannot understand it if you don't understand that we as Christians have a different hierarchy of values than the secular culture. Every culture has a kind of hierarchy of values where you put some values at the top and you think, I must have this in order to live a fulfilled life. And then there are other things it's not that important. Our culture puts sexual expression at the top. Without that, you do not live a fulfilled human life. As a Christian, I do not do that. I think sex is important, but it's not on the top level which defines a meaningful human life. Remember, as a Christian, I follow a celibate man. We think that Jesus Christ lived the most beautiful, most wonderful life, and he never expressed himself sexually. It has happened when I've given that answer that someone have asked this, okay, I'm a lesbian. What's in it for me? That's a good question. And my answer is exactly the same thing as for me as an heterosexual man. There's no difference. What's in it for you and for me is an offer to have a re-established relationship with your Creator, to come into sync with the whole meaning of your existence, to get to know the God who is the source of all beauty and pleasure and joy that we can experience in this world. There is a source for that, and that is the living God. And to become a follower of Jesus, you will be connected to that source. Jesus himself claims to be the bread of life, who ultimately is the answer for your inner hunger. He's the living water, who ultimately is the answer for your spiritual thirst. So this will be a question about, can Jesus deliver on his promise as the life of bread, as the living water? Let me end by saying, just very briefly, we can talk more about it, about the transgender issue. And you see there's the transgender flag, the pride flag. The rainbow flag is much more famous. This is the transgender flag. The transgender movement has its roots back in the book by the French philosopher and author Simone de Beauvoir. And in her book, The Second Sex, she has this famous sentence: one is not born, but becomes a woman. One is not born, but becomes a woman. And she makes a distinction between biological sex and gender. And out from that, the trans movement has started to grow. Originally a very small, tiny movement of people saying, in my inner being, I am not what my body is. I have an inner identity which contradicts my body. So biologically I am a woman, but my real identity is that I am a man. And this has, during the last decades, just exploded. Here are some figures from Sweden. The number of new cases of diagnosed gender dysphoria among girls aged 13 to 17 has increased by almost 1,500% since 2008. So it just exploded, young people saying, I'm born in the wrong body. But recently it has been confirmed that many of those people who are diagnosed with gender dysphoria also have high incidence of several other psychiatric diagnoses like autism, depression, and anxiety disorders. And it's very well known that people who are struggling with autism have this feeling of being not connected to other people, of feeling different. And in my view, our culture now have given a new tool to these young people to understand their feeling of being disconnected and of being different. And people have started to think, maybe my feelings of being different and disconnected is because I was born in the wrong body. It has now also been shown that a vast majority of people will grow out of transgenderism within 5 years. So it has been shown that it is not, for most people, a lifelong situation to struggle with gender dysphoria. It is especially during young age and teenage years that people struggle with that, and naturally they grow out of it. In light of that, it's such a tragic that our medical profession have gone in to start to operate and to give hormone blockers and on chemical way try to change the bodies. And American philosophers, Edward Fieser, he says this: if we should take seriously the thesis that a person was born in the wrong body, why can't we take seriously the thesis that a person is under the delusion he was born in the wrong body? Which is more plausible a priori? What evidence would favor A over B? That's actually a very good question. If our culture says you need to take this thesis seriously, a person can be born in the wrong body, why shouldn't we take this thesis seriously, that you can be under the delusion, you can be mistaken and think you are born in the wrong body? In my view, the most helpful analogy here is the analogy of anorexia. So a lot of young women especially, but also some men, are struggling with anorexia. And they have this inner image of themselves as being overweight. And they starve themselves. Now, this feeling is extremely strong, as is gender dysphoria. And no one should take that lightly. We should affirm fully the pain of struggling with anorexia or gender dysphoria. The feeling is 100% right. It's not real. The feeling is, and the pain is 100% real. But what do we do with anorexia? No one is saying, let's go with your feeling. Let's help you to become even thinner. No, we say, we understand your pain. Your pain is real, but your image of yourself is wrong. Let's help you to have a more true image of who you really are. My brother is a psychologist and he works specifically with anorexia. And I think that is the way we should relate to gender dysphoria, to affirm that we understand that the pain is real, but help people to say yes to the objective fact of the body. And help people to affirm what God has created them to. Okay, thank you so much for listening this long presentation. It was longer than I thought.
Well, we're going to wrap up here. I'm going to pray to dismiss you. Stefan's already had a very long day. He preached up at Zionsville Fellowship today. He had lunch with me, which is probably the highlight of your day, I'm assuming. And then here tonight. So I don't want to speak for you, but I'm guessing, at least I know with at least one person, you've said you can chat with them briefly afterwards. So let's just be very respectful of that. Make sure we let him, get out of here in a very timely manner here this evening. So I'll just answer one question that was asked to me. Why are we doing this here? Why do we even do this here at Life Point? And the answer is just simply, we certainly hear the voices from our culture that say the church has been so dismissive of homosexuals and so mean to homosexuals that we've lost the ability to speak into their lives. And although I think there's some truth to that to some extent, certainly there have been churches, not just in the States, but I'm sure abroad as well, that have been very, very mean-spirited about this and have not taken a biblical approach. I don't think that's true about Life Point. There would be some, obviously, I've had some who've told me they disagree with me, and then out the door they've gone, and I understand that. But we want to be clear here at Life Point, and Stefan already articulated this so well already, so I don't need to re-articulate it. But the reality is that we are called to speak the truth in love, and so we do need to know what the truth is, right? Culture would say just speak love, but we're told to speak the truth in love, and so we want you to know the truth, and we want you to be equipped with the truth. Tonight's an example of doing that, equipping us with the truth. And then we're called, right, to then speak that truth in love. And then the onus is on us as a church, collectively, corporately, and on us as individuals to demonstrate grace and mercy and love to people while we're speaking the truth. So this is our example, or this is our way of saying, here's the truth, right? And now we know the truth. And of course, he didn't answer every question that could be answered about this or brought up about this, but we know the truth. And now our responsibility is to speak this truth in love to our neighbors and to our friends and to Catherine, wherever you are, to your brother and the situations. Particularly, again, there's some of you, there's some teenagers here. The pressure's strong on you, right? Now, that doesn't mean it's not strong on adults or those beyond their teen years. Mary, wherever you're at, and talking about your job situation, I don't know how old you are, Mary. I'm gonna say you're not in high school or college age, right? So that doesn't mean the pressure isn't there too. And sometimes that pressure is even stronger, right? Because it's a livelihood now and not just how you relate to your peers. But we need this across the spectrum. But I'm glad to see some teens here. And I hope you're listening and hearing the truth of what Scripture has to say and what the history of this is. So you too can also speak the truth in love to your classmates and friends. So that's why we did this tonight. Stefan, you made it possible. Thank you so much for being here, taking time out, and traveling all the way across the pond to be with us here. And we wanna thank you. So yeah, let's do that. Let's thank Stefan for his time. Okay, well, let me pray. We'll dismiss you this evening. Lord, I pray your blessing upon all that are gathered here. Pray Pray your blessing upon Stefan as he continues his travels and his ministry as he moves about here in the States, and don't know his whole agenda, so whatever that might be, we pray that it will be a sweet return home to Ingrid and to his family as well. So bless him, keep him safe in his travels, but we're praying for great opportunities, Lord, to share with us with others as he shared tonight on a multitude of different topics that he shares on. So bless him, bless his ministry, bless the ministry of the European Leadership Forum and these other ministries that he's engaged in as well. And bless all of us, Lord. Go with us as we go about our ways into different areas of our own lives here as we leave tonight. So we love you, Lord. We're so thankful for the gospel. We're so thankful for what you've given us in Jesus. We're so thankful for revealing that truth to us so that we might know that, and we might live a life that is abundant and free with a great hope of eternity beyond this. We want that, Father, for our friends and our family and our co-workers and those that we come into contact with. So help us to be salt and light as you've called us to be, Lord. Go with us, we pray, in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight.